Welcome to the AIOps Evolution Weekly broadcast. This series features discourse on topics pertinent to the C-level conversation revolving the integration of artificial intelligence into the ever-evolving IT operations landscape. Discover trends and actionable tips for digital transformation, as well as the latest news on how AIOps is transforming business and government operations to create flow in their organization. And don't stay in the dark on the latest industry news. Join the AIOps Evolution community to stay connected and subscribe to the show at AIOpsevolution.com. Now, let's join our hosts, Sean McDermott and Bill Driscoll, IT thought leaders, visionaries, and the voices on the other end of the mic for the latest episode of AIOps Evolution Weekly.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's AIOps Weekly broadcast. I'm your host, Sean McDermott, and my co-host, Bill Driscoll. Bill, how you doing today?
Doing good, Sean. Down in the office for the second week in a row, which is nice. Yeah. Nice to be among some people.
Yeah, I'm in the office too. So you can see earlier from my guitars in the background that I got. I'm in the office. I haven't been here for a while, so it's always nice to be back and see everybody. But
I look forward to you playing it around the fire pit tonight.
yeah, that will not be happening. All right, so we got a lot to cover today, and not a huge amount of time, so we want to kind of keep the schedule. So today, as the audience knows, we were going to spend the next, X number of episodes, I don't know, 10 or 12 episodes, something like that, talking about different areas of operations and how AI can influence those areas. So we've talked about service management, and today we're talking about business intelligence and predictive analytics. So we've got a couple interesting articles, actually 3 articles here that I know you've come up with a couple. So we'll just go ahead and get started on this. So first article that I wanted to bring up is called Best BI Tools 2021 Business Intelligence Software. So I thought this was actually an article that talks about, I think they highlight like 10 different BI tools. That is, you can go online, you can get, whoever thinks pros and cons. That's not why we're here. But what I found interesting about this article is I really liked this as kind of a precursor to the whole discussion about like what is BI, what are BI tools, and so this article was written by Jen Fulmer of IT Business Edge, and it really kind of talks about okay, so what is BI, right? So BI is business intelligence. It's ability to use different data sources to make business decisions, right? So pretty. And BI is a pretty broad term. So what's a BI tool? BI tool is something that you use to do BI, right? And there's a number of ones out there. This is a pretty mature space.
Yeah.
And I think that you can also look at the context of, do you really need to buy a big pool platform in order to do BI? And the answer really is no, right? I mean, I was doing an internal project the other day, and I wanted to look at, our customers related to the revenue that our customers have and the profitability of them, and kind of put them into different buckets to understand where our customers sit in relation to those two axes. And I was able to go into work with my controller and get a bunch of information that he has been spreadsheets and different things, and pull that data down, drop it into a spreadsheet, run a couple pivot tables, learn how to do some interesting graphing in Excel that I'd never been able to do. And we were able to come up with a kind of a pretty cool, 4-quadrant chart and plot things inside of that. So now we had to figure out how to replicate it, but it was a good exercise to understand. So what my point is that you don't really need BI platforms to do BI. I mean, you can do it in Excel, right? So, but when you start talking about BI platforms and you start talking about the introduction of AI, you really kind of need to be working on a platform that has some type of AI component into it. So, so did you get a chance to see this article?
I did, yeah. And I think one of the first question is sort of, why are we talking about business intelligence? Is that really, they've been around a while, right? BI tools, data warehouses, data lakes, OLAP type tools, reporting dashboards. I mean, these have been around in the business world for a long time. And, so AI ops is sort of an area where there's sort of, you'd look at it, you do some historical analysis, maybe of your tickets, historical analysis of your events, maybe performance data, although that tends to be in a different system. But really, BI has always sort of had this other purpose more on the business side, right? But I think we have seen over the last dozen years or so BI tools being applied more to do analysis. And I even did a project 15 years ago using business objects, which I think is TIPCO now. But to do analysis of that kind of data, event data, and come up with algorithms, come up with better ways to filter and group and cluster and other back into the operational systems. And so I think it's worth looking at the bigger BI space, because one, that's where a lot of the AI and machine learning kind of forefront is happening. And so how can we leverage some of these tools to then take those models, do some learning, run some things maybe that aren't available in your real time, monitoring systems today, and then be able to apply those back, maybe not through machine learning in the AIOps world, but at least let's learn and apply models and do some training over in the BI systems that have some AI, especially the more advanced ones. And how can we bring that back into the AIOps world, at least for now, while we're sort of seeing evolution of so many different monitoring tools having BI and machine learning in them. And I think you might go ahead, Sean.
I think that kind of jumping off to your point of why we're talking about BI in the context of AI ops is, in my mind, is because these tools are absolutely applicable to the operations environment. Like
Yep.
when you look at use cases and you hear these companies talk, like this article talks about BI, talks about data backed decisions, higher customer satisfaction, better employee engagement, increased revenue. Those aren't operational things. But what's
Mhm.
interesting is the tools that are BI tools have been applicable in the operations world for a long time. I
Yeah.
mean, I can't tell you how many companies that we worked with were using, or may even still be using, Crystal Reports, right?
Yeah.
And
Sure.
Crystal Reports is a BI tool, and it was basically, and a number of vendors back in the mid 2000s were actually embedding Crystal Reports as part of their platform. So they were like, we're not going to build a predictive, BI tool that or data analytics, visualization tool. We're just going to basically OEM and white label Crystal Reports right into our
Yeah.
platform.
Right.
So all these technologies, when it comes down to it, it all comes down to the use case. But these technologies, I mean, you can use like some of the major platforms that this article talks about is you know, uh, like Microsoft's Power BI,
Yeah.
right? And you can certainly use Microsoft Power BI for some of your applications, but you can also use Power BI for tracking of information around system resources and SCCM and all the tools that they use for systems management. I know a
Right.
number of customers that use Tableau across a number
Yeah.
of different business units, including operations. MicroStrategies, which is one of the companies that's local to the Washington D.C. area where I'm at, is been used. I know a number of customers that use it in their operational space. So
Yeah.
it's the use cases and operations are really around predictive analysis and trying to understand. And we'll get to that. That's actually the whole
Yep.
article on that. So
Yeah. And
so I think
I'd
that was
say,
I thought. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah, I was going to say, some of the takeaways is they went through the 10 ones that we saw, and some big ones like TIPCO, Oracle, MicroStrategy, been around a long time. I think Domo, Click, and Tableau have been some alternative, maybe to get tools into the hands of the users, maybe a little more than some of the others, which are more for power users. But they talked a lot about some of the pros and cons, and I think a lot of them was just self-service, how intuitive, how much data preparation is needed. But a couple of things I thought were interesting is the ability to do search. And I was surprised you don't see the Elk Stack in here and Kibana and Elastic, because that really is a BI type tool and reporting tool but it's very search oriented, which gets into sort of unstructured data, text analytics. They also mentioned an example, I think it was Power BI using image detection. So, doesn't apply so much to AI ops, but I think you're just seeing a wider range of data that's coming into these systems, and the ability to sort of combine machine learning models and search kind of all together. So Yep.
Yeah, my guess is that is when you talk about, Elastic and Splunk, they're known for
Mhm.
their unstructured data and log analysis, right?
Yeah.
So when you talk about BI, that tends to be more business focused. So you're getting things like, oh, let's talk about increased revenue, employee experience. So I'm not surprised by that, but yeah, you absolutely need to throw those platforms. And if you're in the operations world, you need to throw those platforms into the game. And when you're looking at different ways of doing, um, data reporting and data visualization, things like that. So,
Yep.
all right, so we'll
Exactly.
move on. So I
Yeah.
think you had an
Yep.
interesting article that you wanted to bring up.
I did, and it's very. I mean, the last one was sort of a vendor agnostic look at what are the tools out there. This one's actually written by Tableau. Like I said, we've worked with them and see them at a lot of customers. But it was called Three Ways to Help Everyone Make Fast Data Driven Decisions with Modern BI. I think they had some key points about democratization of data, giving your organization more ways to interact with it, bringing kind of more advanced analytics to the problem solving were sort of three of the key points they were trying to make. As I sort of relate this back to how does this apply to IT ops, I think, so much of analyzing a problem, an incident that's happened or a performance issue that you need to sort of get to the bottom of, it isn't about the system, the monitoring system sort of producing this silver bullet answer, even though we'd like it to do all the work of root cause analysis and all the insights and figure it out and just tell us, look, the problem's right here, and then here are all the ones affected. What it really is a sorting through a lot of information as to what happened, and the ML is really to help you figure out what's the highest probability answers and what is a bunch of context and information that's relevant to the problem that's happening. And I think, tools like Tableau, if you can apply it to sort of doing a deeper dive or troubleshooting a particular issue or looking at a general patterns, really allows you to sort of see the bigger picture and work with that data to kind of come up for the human to really come up with the answers, because a lot of times there just isn't enough information, or really the algorithms don't, the intelligence just isn't there to really come up with, here's the answer, here's the decision that needs to be made. And so I think the article really talks about the three different areas I talked to: get hands into get data into the users, which does not happen nearly enough, give them more ways to kind of interact with and train them on how to do that, and then some of the advanced analytics, which the more advanced it is, the more kind of training you probably need. But I think there's a lot more people out there, especially in operations, that need to be taught and kind of learn how to use the more advanced kind of ways to look at data.
Yeah, I think a couple key takeaways, and just to kind of reiterate this idea of democratizing data. I mean, I've talked
Mm-hmm.
about this for 20 years, right?
Yeah.
And the data, um, people are so protective of their data, and the operations team, are worried about how their data will be interpreted. And I think that there's a fair amount of you know utilization of data, right? So I can use this
Mm-hmm.
data to look at someone else's performance and keep them from looking at our performance and and throwing stones at each other. But uh, to me, the democratization of data is such a key thing in the whole discussion, and
Mm-hmm.
making sure that really data is available to everybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and because you can make so many decisions, and it's interesting, we're going to talk about this last article we're going to talk about, actually has an example, and I love examples. So
Mm-hmm.
this in this case, if operations can expand the data out into the application teams, then they have the ability to start looking at certain things going on in the operations environment and looking at how they might be able to design applications better. So the
Yep.
democratization of data is a key takeaway here, right? And that's to me, that's a leadership challenge and leadership vision of how to collect data and make it available to as many people as possible, and how to protect that data so it can't be changed and things like that. But there's ways of doing that. The second thing
Yep.
that you kind of brought up was the usability of the data.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that this is where modern platforms start really showing their value in the area of like no code report generation and visualization. So you don't have to be an expert on and be a data scientist and understand all the things. You're just trying to say, hey, I've got this question. I'm trying to figure out, how to answer this question. What data do I need to do it? And you can actually then drag and drop and pull data in, look at it, and be like, that's not exactly what I'm looking for. That's not answering my question. But let's bring in this field. Let's remove this, and let's kind of flip everything sideways and see what
Hmm.
happens. I mean, I
Yep.
do that a lot when I'm working on an Excel or something like that, and I've got a large data set. I may
Right.
build a pivot table and be like, okay, I think that was a question I was answering, but it's not coming out the way I want. So let's twist it around a little bit. And the more you can do that in a low code, no code environment, along with the data democratization, then you've got a really kind of a winning combination there. Then it's just all about getting the data into the, ingestible, right? And making
Yep.
sure that the data sources are, you've got the connections to the data sources, and the data
Yeah.
is accurate and it's clean and things like that. So,
Yeah, I'd add that I think what's critical with the democratization of data also needs to be probably the democratization of thought models and structured thinking, right? And I know a lot of times when we've implemented monitoring tools or event management tools, we sort of to educate the SMEs on here is the models that we can apply, the problem types or the problem solving approaches that we can apply, and then how does data kind of fit into that. So we talk about machine learning. Machine learning isn't just like Wild West, figure it out. It's actually structured ways of going about learning, right? Computer
mhm.
learning. And I think as you democratize data, there also needs to be kind of some learning around about those. How do these systems learn, and what's some structured models of, I guess, of thinking, and then allowing that'll really allow the democratization, the benefits of it to take off, because now people have the data and they understand the models more, at least from a point and click and drag and drop standpoint, to be able to apply the right thinking to that data. So,
Yeah, I think when it comes, if somebody's listening to this broadcast right now and saying, okay, you guys are talking about BI, we got it. What's this got to do with AI ops? This is where it actually starts coming in, right? Bringing in machine learning and AI into these platforms to be able to and natural language processing, right? And tying all those things together to make it easier for people to get to the answers that they want from the data
mhm.
without having to be an expert, right? So you
Yeah.
don't have to basically go to somebody and say, hey, I need this report, and it takes them a week to do it. And then you get it back and like, that's not exactly what I'm
Yeah.
looking for. I know it's what I asked for, but I didn't really know what I was asking. When someone told me this a long, long time ago, I wish I could remember who it was, but they basically said, I think it was a guy that used to do a lot of work in SAS. Remember that SAS
Yeah.
platform?
Yep.
And he was an expert in it on Wall Street, and I used to work with him. And he said, reports always create more questions than they answer, right? So you
Hmm.
basically say, here's a report, and someone reads the report and they go, okay, now I have five more questions. It's like, okay, here's three more reports to answer those questions. Okay, well, each one, now I have a question around each one of these reports, right?
Right.
So, and that's kind of the point, is that you don't want to have to wait to say, okay, I need a report that does X. You get it. You wait however long, and then you're like, this isn't exactly what I'm looking for. Or, okay, this is spawning four or five more questions,
Hmm.
and now I want to. Now I have to go back and say, can you create more reports? And they're creating more and more reports, and then you finally get a setback, and you forgot what the question was in the first place. So
Right.
the idea of being able to real time go into these platforms, and that's where AI and machine learning comes in, right? And the ability to do predictive analysis, to be able to using natural language processing to start looking at, okay, I think you're asking for this, so let me build this for you, right?
Hmm.
And see what
Right.
you think, and using um, machine learning and AI to help understand what you're looking for. And this is a perfect example of like supervised machine learning, right? Where you basically ask for something, the machine presents something to you, you give it feedback saying, this isn't exactly what I'm looking for. Change this, change that. The machine can actually now
Yeah.
learn from your
Right.
supervised input back in. Say, okay,
Yep.
next time somebody asks a question like this, I'm going to present this data because
Mhm.
I got feedback in from this human over here doing that. So
Right. Yep.
that's where all this starts coming together.
Yep.
Any other questions on that one?
No, you mentioned a specific example, kind of how it applies. I'm interested to drill into that. I think
Oh,
on
yeah. So
the
this is
last article story.
an article written by David Lithicum from Deloitte for Tech Beacon, and the title is "How AI Ops is a Game Changer for Predictive Analytics and Cloud Ops." So, what I loved about this article is that he just gave an example, and I just thought it was. I'm a big fan of examples, and did I say that already? Or no, I
Yeah.
love examples. I said that earlier. So what I'm
I thought you
really
said you like samples, like when you go to Costco. And
oh, I do like samples too. Yeah, I'm a big fan of samples. But I don't have a Costco membership anymore, so
okay.
I haven't had a sample Costco sample in a while. Anyways, so what he's really talking about is kind of like the beginning article is a lot about what we already talked about, so I don't think we need to go over this. But he did talk about this idea of primary data and correlated data, and the
Mm,
example he used is the ability to have a online cloud infrastructure that is processing orders for, I think you use stand up paddleboards.
mhm.
And the idea of when you're bringing in and the seasonality of this, right? And this is really important in kind of retail, right? And the seasonality of understanding what is going on in the buying cycle and the order processing and how to spin up cloud servers. And if you get it wrong, you can be paying some pretty hefty bills. And if you get it right,
Yeah.
if you get it wrong, you can either be paying hefty bills. If you get it too low, then you've got people, transactions taking a long time, and people, basically bowing out because they can't get their order processed. So neither of those things are good things. So he talks about using a lot of the analytics coming in from cloud applications and all this instrument data that we talk about, and using that for processing of predictive changes and predictive understanding of what's happening based on different time stamps and things like that. What I found really interesting about this example is that he called that the kind of the primary data. Then he talked about this correlated data, um, um, and the correlated data is bringing in other data sources to help explain why these time changes
Yeah.
might be happening. So if your AI is basically looking at a data stream and saying, "Hey, I'm predicting based on patterns what's going to happen in the next 15 minutes, 4 hours, 24 hours, 7 days," right?
Mhm.
You still may not know exactly why that's happening, right? So he basically says this is where AI and machine learning comes in to bring in other sources of data like weather. And if you're selling stand up paddle boards and you're bringing in weather applications and you can correlate the weather patterns to the geographic locations of where orders are coming on to your cloud response time and response time of your applications and your order management applications and transactions, you can now start bringing causality, right? So you can now start saying, oh, okay, wait a minute. We're seeing this seasonality because we're seeing a warm front in the southern United States,
Mhm.
southern east
Yeah.
coast of the United States, and we're seeing an increase in orders coming out of there. So now we're getting smart. So that's like I said, I love examples,
Yep. Yep.
and that's just the beginning, right? And the beginning of that. And the point is that one point he made, which I think was important, is that you don't necessarily need an AI and predict it to do this, right? It may not even
Mhm.
need a BI tool if you have the data and you have some correlated data. But where it starts getting tough is when you start having multiple types of correlated data
Yeah.
and then trying to bring multiple correlations and context to a question. Then you start having some really challenging things that that AI machine learning is perfectly set up to take care of.
Right. Right. Yeah, there was a lot to digest in this article. I think one of the key things takeaways I had is, CloudOps is another example of AI machine learning algorithms kind of being in the infrastructure itself versus being in centralized tools that a lot of kind of built in to the cloud. And the nature of the cloud is now you've got all these tools to drive automation, drive resource management, especially directly in in the cloud without necessarily needing a kind of over the top tool or a separate operations tool. And I think that's where a lot of the innovation takes place. Last week, I think we talked about configuration management and CIs and whatnot. And, we had some articles we didn't read about, but about supply chain, and logistics. And I think, what the cloud's really done is take IT and away from being, maybe fixed assets where there's the IT assets, the servers and whatnot. We just need to monitor it, to being really a logistics problem where resources are coming in and out of your infrastructure. And it's really about managing, doing logistics problems and supply chain problems, and getting resources to the right place at the right time to support the right applications and demand of those applications. And so I think that some of those examples you just played, the weather impacts shipping, right? But there's other correlated data that's out there that you need to continue to bring into the models to correlate it to this very dynamic environment, that the AI and machine learning and the environment are bringing resources up and down to meet the demand. So yeah, I think it's a very dynamic place, right? And really where a lot of the experimentation and kind of innovation is happening in AI ops.
Yeah, yeah, I thought it was a great article. So hats off to David Lithicum. I will give one piece of one thing that kind of just stuck at me is that he basically said the idea is that massive amounts of data can be weaponized for all sorts of purposes, and I just don't like that term, weaponized. So
Yeah,
other than that, great
good.
article, and I think really kind of ties in where AI ops kind of fits into the overall business
Mhm.
environment, business ecosystem when you're trying to make decisions on where to allocate resources across the board and how it might affect production and sales and things like that.
Okay.
So
Yep. Yep.
great article. So that's all I have for today. You have anything else?
Nope, I'm good. Like we said, I think we were short on time today, but I think we covered a
Yeah.
lot still.
You got plans for the weekend?
This weekend, no, I was out. I was away last weekend, so nice to be home this weekend. So I think I'm going
Good.
to a football
Good.
game actually. So
Oh, excellent. I went to the Florida Gators game last week, so that
very
was
nice.
my first
Good.
Gators game. Quite the
Big time
experience.
SEC.
Uh, big time. I've never been to a big time SEC school, and it was
Yeah.
quite the experience. It was
Yeah.
awesome. Anyway, so I want to thank our sponsor, Windward Consulting Group. You can find Windward at www.windward.com, WINDWARD. Windward is the leading global leader in AI ops. And you can hit their website and find out all kinds of content and thought leadership on what's going on in the AI ops world. But with that, I want to thank our audience for tuning in this week. And again, I'm your host, Sean McDermott, and Bill Driscoll. And we will see you next week. Take
Yep.
care.
See you next week.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us in this conversation about AIOps and the future of IT operations. Interested in a deeper dive on these topics? Check out our resources available at AIOpsevolution.com. And remember to subscribe to get the latest episode.